Welcome to the Fit Strong Women Over 50 podcast, episode number 131. Hi, everyone. I'm Chris. Thank you for joining us.
And I'm Jill. Chris and I are your hosts for this podcast and the founders of the Becoming Ellie community.
We decided to name our community Becoming Ellie because Ellie was the Norse goddess of aging who beat Thor in a wrestling match. We thought we want to be like Ellie.
Yes, we do. You can find out more about the Becoming Ellie community and this podcast at our website, becomingellie.com. Ellie is spelled E-L-L-I.
Be sure to sign up for our newsletter while you're there. That way, you'll know about new episodes and anything else that's new with Jill and me and the whole Becoming Ellie community.
We interviewed Lori LeBlanc recently on the podcast. What episode was that, Chris?
Yes, that was episode 129.
Yes. Okay, good. Lori talked about the work that she did with Joanna Bowen to improve her health and fitness. And Lori mentioned some of the testing she had done. Chris and I both thought we need to talk with Joanna ourselves.
Yes, and we're delighted that Joanna agreed to be on the podcast. So let's hear what she has to say.
Joanna Bowen, certified nutritional practitioner, is the founder of the Younger with Food community and creator of the AGEless Method, a program that empowers women to rewind their cellular aging clock by using diet and lifestyle habits so they can reclaim the resilient body, healthy brain, glowing skin, and youthful energy of their prime.
A graduate of the University of Waterloo, the Institute of Holistic Nutrition and Functional Nutritional Alliance, Joanna has pursued additional training in culinary genomics and is a licensed facelift diet coach through the Academy of Beauty Nutrition.
Author of 3 Genius Hacks to Unlock Inner Youth Without Botox, Fillers, or Cosmetic Surgery, Joanna takes an inside-out approach to aging youthfully through the emerging science of epigenetics and nutrigenomics. Welcome, Joanna. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm just delighted to be here.
Well, we're looking forward to talking with you.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
We talked with Lori LeBlanc recently, and she talked about working with you and all of the information she learned and how useful it was and how she used that information to take control of her health. And there were a few things she talked about, and I want to make sure we cover all of that today.
Absolutely.
Perhaps we can just start with defining epigenetics and the nutrigenomics.
Yeah.
I was doing it okay until just there.
It's quite a mouthful.
It is. Can you maybe just tell us what those are?
Yeah, of course. Now, some of your listeners will probably have heard of epigenetics at some point along the way. Others, it might be brand new for. So we'll just assume that it's brand new for everybody.
Yes.
Everybody understands genetics, right? We all have DNA. We understand what that is. It's the code that basically informs our body how to build things, how to build protein and collagen and hormones and all of the things that make us us, right? So that's our genetics. Epi, the EPI, that little word that goes in front of genetics, what it means is above or beyond. So when we take this concept of something being above or beyond our genetics, epigenetics, what we're talking about is a layer of information that surrounds our genes, that bathes our genes day in, day out, this layer of information that could influence how our genes are actually expressed. So we're not changing our genes. Our genes are our genes. We're born with them. We live with them. We die with the same genes, right? But this layer of information that surrounds our genetics that influences when they turn on or off or how they dial the volume up or down, that is our epigenetics. So epigenetics is basically just the science of this layer of information that surrounds our genes that allows us to kind of play around with how our genes get expressed. Now, nutrigenomics is under the umbrella of epigenetics. So if epigenetics is all of the information that comes into our bodies from, the environment around us, then nutrigenomics is really focusing on, well, what's the food piece? What's the nutritional aspect of epigenetics that can influence the way that our genes get expressed? So we're looking at like specific bioactive components in foods, in fruits, in vegetables, in grains, and everything that we put into our bodies that has the power to influence how our genes get expressed, whatever our genes are. Some genes we may want to dial them up in volume. Some we may want to shut down and pretend we don't even have them. But our food choices, our nutrition choices can influence that as part of this larger umbrella of epigenetics. And it's not just food. Food is a massive part because we are bathing our bodies in nutrients. We're eating 3 meals a day, and sometimes we're having snacks where, this is a huge part of the information coming into our bodies from the outside environment. But it's not just food. And I think we can all agree to that, right? It's the things we eat, but it's also the things we drink, the things we smoke, the stress we endure, the exercise we do, the social connections and the community that we're involved in. It's all these interconnected pieces, the toxins we're exposed to. Everything informs how our genes get expressed. And so we look at the holistic picture of it with a focus on one of the biggest aspects, which is food, because like I said, we eat 3 times a day or more. And so that's where I focus my energy.
And we can control a lot more about food than we can about the air we breathe or...
That's exactly true. Yes.
Right, for sure.
Things that we're exposed to.
What kind of testing is required in order to explore this and influence this and find out more about it? What types of tests?
The first thing I would say is that there's no testing that is absolutely required. We can influence, and we do influence our genes day in, day out without even knowing it, right? So we don't have to do extra testing, but testing gives us the ability to see what's happening under the hood, right? So we can, there's that expression, we can't manage what we don't measure. It gives us a tool, a metric to be able to measure the influences that are impacting our genetics. So when I work with clients through my group program, or we actually do involve testing for most of them. They have a choice. If they don't want to pursue testing, that's fine. But I love the testing because it shows us from an objective perspective, are the things that we're doing actually having an effect? So we look at testing like the pace of aging metric, which is something I'm sure we'll talk about as we move through the rest of the interview. We look at methylation patterns. We look at telomere length. We can look at even just the regular blood tests that we're able to do through our general physicians through, things like cholesterol and blood sugar and inflammatory markers. So there's all these tests that are available to us. Some of them are available through doctors. Some of them are available through nutritionists like myself, but there's many ways to look at aging. And the thing that most people have been, brought up to believe is that there's really only one way to measure age, and that's the calendar or the chronological age, right? Like the day you're born starts ticking this clock, and, the number of trips that we take around the sun is this solid metric that we have no control over. It's just this ongoing mathematical equation to tell us the number of days we've been on this planet inhabiting this body. But that's not the only way to measure our age. There are so many different ways. And we look at something called biological aging in our program, which is really looking at, what is the age of our cells? How are cells functioning? Because, really, when you think about it, it's blatantly obvious. We don't all age at the same rate. We can see this in the people we know in our communities. We may be the exact same age as someone we went to high school with, and yet we are aging at different paces. And it's obvious in the way that we look, in the way that we move, in the way that our bodies function, in the disease pathologies that we exhibit. We see that there's this pace of aging difference, but we haven't been able to measure it until more recently.
And you just explained high school reunions too.
Yeah, exactly. Now, some people will cheat, right? Some people will cheat this, maybe not cheat, but they will enhance the way that they look with the intention of trying to fool people into believing that they are younger than they are. Or, some people will just straight up lie about their age. But really what we're looking for is not the shortcuts, not the quick fixes, not the lying approach, but really what can we do? What power do we have to shift the processes that are happening inside of our bodies that can then make us look younger as a result, but also function younger in the process so that our bodies are
feel
able to
younger.
Exactly. Yes.
If we're going to take these tests, the the tests that we would take, not that our doctors would do the blood work or whatever, but how do we do that? Do you have to spit in a vial? You have to have blood drawn? What's the actual process for that?
Yeah, there are a few different ways to do it. The way that I prefer to do it with all of my clients at the moment is through a finger prick blood collection. This seems to be the best metric at the moment. As science evolves, as more studies come out, they can validate different methods of collection. So in the past, we've done saliva collection, we've done blood draws where you actually go to, a blood draw facility and get your blood drawn. At the moment, what we're doing is blood collection through finger prick, which is much easier. You can do it at home. But as the science evolves and changes, the metrics and the way that we measure it can also become easier. Personally, I think a finger prick is a very easy way
right.
to do it, but especially when you're able to do it at your own leisure at home and not have to go to a doctor or a lab.
So how do our genes determine what we should eat? Can you talk to us about how this helps us figure out the best foods for our body?
Yeah, absolutely. So genes definitely play a role here. So we inherit certain genes from our biological parents. We're born with them, we live with them, we die with them, like I said. And for the most part, they are unchanging. So our genes, like I said earlier, they tell our bodies how to do things, how to make muscle, how to pump out more red blood cells, how to make hormones and liver cells and all these things that our bodies are coded to be able to do. So yes, our genes have a lot to do with the way that we age and what we should eat, but genes actually aren't the only factor. They may not even be the biggest factor. So just because you have a particular gene variant, and there are some of these gene variants that are becoming more well-known in the media. So things like, can you digest lactose from milk products? Or should you be eating, more omega-3 fatty acids than the average person? Or do you need more vitamin D? There are genes that tell us some of these really helpful clues along the way, but it's not just the genes that we're born with, it's how these genes are operating. And we know this because when we look at identical twins who have the exact same DNA, they're not always eating the same way, or maybe they are eating the same way and one of them's getting sick and the other one's staying healthy. There are a number of different ways that we can see that genes are playing this important role, but they're not the end. They're not the end of the story. There's this much bigger piece that's happening behind, and that's the epigenetics that we were talking about. So we aren't powerless and we're not victims to the genes that we're born with. We may have a long family history where, all of the women in my family who have past menopause start to gain weight or develop cellulite or whatever these things are. Maybe a big long branch of my family tree deals with breast cancer. There's all of these genetic components, but we have this power through the epigenetics. So I don't want people to focus just on the genetic component. Yes, it's part of the story that we all have inside of us, but it is not the end of the story. We have so much more power than just kind of following along, settling for what is genetically programmed inside of us. We have so much power to shift that.
And food has a role in that?
It absolutely does. Yeah. So I was mentioning earlier that there are these bioactive components in certain foods that we eat. And so when we use food as kind of more of a tool to bring these bioactive components in that have the power to kind of dial the volume up or down on certain genes, that is, basically our food becomes this tool rather than just a way to fill a hungry belly or to satisfy an emotional craving. All of a sudden, we have this kind of like painter's palette of different colors that we can use to shift the scene that's happening inside of us at any given time. So food has this incredible power if we are choosing the right foods, if we're choosing foods that have these bioactive components that science is showing us have these powerful impacts on our genetic environment.
So how do we figure out which are the best foods for us?
Ultimately, we can do DNA testing to look at our own internal genetics and figure out, like I was saying earlier, can I digest dairy? But odds are you probably already know if you can digest dairy.
Right.
Because you can feel it in your body. When your system is upset or not working properly. So we can do genetic testing that will guide us to areas that we may already know ourselves, or maybe some of them are new. Maybe some of these things are news to us. Oh, you mean I'm not supposed to feel bloated after every meal? Oh, that's a shocker. So we can do genetic testing that will kind of expose what we internally, like individually, what we can and can't use to thrive. But ultimately, humans are mostly the same. There's not massive differences between us. Yes, there are these little tweaks here and there, but there are also foods that we know that have an impact on general processes in the body that influence the way that we age. So things like foods that impact our inflammatory pathways, or foods that impact our blood sugar management, or foods that can help us play around with detoxification. So there are things that we can all do, regardless of whether we splurge on an individual DNA test or not, that will, for the vast majority of us, that will influence our genes in the way that we want them to go. If you have the bandwidth and the money and the desire to really drill down on your own body, your own genetics, you can absolutely do that too. There's so much exciting science that's available to us now. But for those people who are listening who are thinking, oh, I could never afford that, and it's too big of a commitment, and I don't want that level of information anyway. Well, you don't have to. You can just apply the stuff that works for 99.9% of the population.
So there are common denominators in food for us that you don't like do a genetic test and say to someone, hey, you should never eat vegetables.
I have not yet found that person. Yeah, no, I've not seen anything quite that drastic yet. Definitely. With the example I gave earlier of, dairy and lactose, that is a really common one that I do see. And typically people are not that surprised when they find out. They're like, oh, that makes sense. Yes, I have experienced some symptoms connected to that. But yeah, there are some foods that are across the board helpful for everyone. Now, this is barring, allergic reactions. Like if you have an allergic reaction to something, I'm not going to make you eat it. Right? But assuming you don't have an allergy, then we know that there are certain foods like turmeric that can dial down the expression of genes connected to inflammatory pathways. We know that there are certain genes that respond to the really deeply hued pigments that can be found in foods like blueberries, right? So unless you're allergic to blueberries or turmeric or, one of these particular foods that has this incredible and validated power to shift genetic expression, they should work for everybody.
I want to go back to the genetic test and what you learn. I understand that you can do the test and it can tell you that you are at risk or greater risk of having, let's say, developing type 2 diabetes. But can you actually see which of those things have been turned on? This gene now is active. Can you tell that?
Great question. Yes. So when you are doing a DNA test, we are not looking at the epigenetics, so the environmental influences at the same time. So these are two separate tests. When we test your DNA, we see what you're born with, right? And you could do that test today. You could do that test in 30 years. That test will not change. Your DNA is your DNA, unchanging. So that test is static. The epigenetic test, the looking at what genes are influenced by these, we call them methylation markers, which genes are influenced by these methylation markers turned on, turned off, dialed up, dialed down, that tells us where we are in this given moment. So, or when the test was taken at any rate. So we can see, oh, these genes connected to inflammation do look like they are exhibiting a pattern that would lead us to believe that you are older than perhaps the calendar says that you are. And so that test does shift with time. It does shift with changes to our diet, with changes to our exercise regime, with changes to our lifestyle. So that is a moving tracker that we can look at again and again and again to see if the things that we're doing, if the habits that we are embracing, if they're actually making the changes that we want to see.
Excellent.
What about supplements? Do you recommend supplements to your clients? And do you have any advice for women over 50, things that we should or we shouldn't take for supplements?
Yes. So my approach, I do take a food first approach. However, there are so many things that we need in our bodies that we just can't eat enough food to get. So even though we want to, in general, encourage this approach of rather than leaning on a supplement or pill, that we actually just changed the foods that we're putting into our bodies to begin with. There are some exceptions to that. And I mean, a number of them are ones that you will have heard of before, like vitamin D is very difficult to get from food sources alone. And many of us don't even have the proper genetics to be able to access vitamin D from the sun, which is where they say that we should get it as a primary source. I myself, when I looked at my DNA, discovered that I have difficulties converting the UVB rays from the sun through the skin into the version of the vitamin that I actually need for my body to function. So there are some supplements that we do recommend, vitamin D being one of them, but there are a handful, just a small handful, that I think are really important as we adopt healthier lifestyles, as we pursue this path. But the thing is that sometimes when people hear these supplements, they're like, okay, great, I'm going to go out and buy all the supplements and then I'm done. And they don't shift the basic underlying patterns of health that really are going to, uphold. When we're pouring supplements into our bodies, we need a foundation that's already established there to help them work properly. We need all of the coenzymes and the cofactors, and our bodies just need to be able to receive them, to process them. We don't want to just be, especially with synthetic vitamins and supplements, we don't want to just be putting garbage into our bodies that becomes expensive urine in the end. So we really want to find supplements that are bioavailable, that our bodies can respect and interpret. And quite often those bioavailable supplements need to originate from food, from food sources, whether it's the food that we're eating or food that we are supplementing through a pill form, but it's still food. So we can take certain foods and pulverize them and dry them and, take the pieces that we need, because we can't eat 8 bushels of vegetables in a day. So a lot of the supplements that I look to are primarily food-based, just upping the levels and then still needing to really honor that foundational nutritional piece to begin with, not taking the supplements as a shortcut.
I see. Yeah, that makes sense.
What about, can we use any of this testing to figure out the best way to exercise? Do you ever say to someone, hey, you'd make a great long distance runner, or you should take bodybuilding? Or are you able to do testing and come up with advice for your clients?
Yes, absolutely. So those who go down the path of individual DNA testing will often see in their reports things that would lead us to believe that they would do better with aerobic training versus strength training, or strength training versus aerobic training, or some balance of the two, which is most common. And sometimes people know this already about themselves. They know that they are good at endurance as opposed to, quick start, racing, that type of thing. And so we will see that in people's individual genetics. But as we age, one of the interesting things is that, I'm sure as you've spoken to many guests on your podcast, that people will talk about sarcopenia, this progressive loss of muscle, particularly that really accelerates after perimenopause, menopause, and beyond. And so we know that for women in the perimenopause years and beyond, that we really need to focus on strength training as part of our core lifestyle health. Now, it doesn't have to be, big, bulky muscle lifting, but we do need to maintain muscle mass in order to age well, to function, for our bodies to function well, in regardless of what our age is, but to actually be able to, carry us to the end of our lives in style, right? So yes, there are these individual aspects of a one-on-one DNA test that will show you, yes, maybe you need to be focusing on aerobics or strength more than the rest. But like I said, when we look at the overall picture for the rest of humanity, the 99.9% of us that are all going to function in a similar way, we know that women 40 and up need to focus on these strength training pieces, the muscle building, the core foundational pieces that are going to allow us to move, to be mobile for the whole ride.
Everyone pretty much needs to do that, regardless of individual gene testing.
Exactly. Yes.
So could you elaborate a little bit more about chronological age versus cellular age? We talked a little bit about that. How do you determine it? And if I get these test results that I don't like my cellular age, what can I do to change it?
We talked earlier about chronological aging, which is a calendar approach to aging. It's a mathematical equation. It only goes in one direction. It's constantly ticking this metronome clock on our lives, right? So we know what age we are based on the number of years old we are, how many trips we've taken around the sun. And then biological age, this other way of aging that I'm really encouraging people to consider, is looking at the pace of aging that we are experiencing on the inside of our bodies. So I call it sometimes cellular age, because it's reflective of the rate that our cells are aging at. So we can measure this cellular way of aging. This is, again, what I do with my clients. We look at the difference between our chronological age and our biological age, the age on the inside of our cells. Instead of just measuring the strict passage of time, X many years have passed since I was born, the cellular or biological age is measuring the pace of our aging, the passage of our bodies through time. So it's kind of like a speedometer in your car, right? You know that as you put your foot on the gas, you are increasing your acceleration through space. So we can measure the rate at which our bodies are moving through time through this biological pace of aging, the cellular pace of aging. And you're right, it doesn't always align 100% with our chronological age. Now, we hope, of course, that our biological cellular age is going to be younger than our chronological age. But a lot of people, that's not the case, right? We see that people have biological ages that would lead us to believe that they are actually functioning in a body that seems older than it should. Unlike chronological age, unlike calendar age, that only moves in one direction, our biological age is actually quite responsive. It can move forward and it can move backwards. And this is where we get really excited, right? Because not only can it speed up and slow down, but we can actually put the car in reverse and start to back it up along the track a little bit and recover some of that premature aging that we may have already gone through. So I know this sounds like science fiction. It's not. It's actual bona fide science. You can actually look up the studies where they've done a lot of research. They started out doing research on rodents, insects, in petri dishes, and now they've moved to the point of being able to show this research actually works in real human bodies. So that's really exciting. So this cellular age, this biological age that they've been looking at, it actually is so responsive that it really only takes a matter of months to start to see these shifts in our body, in the way that we function, in the way that our epigenetics look. So that's really exciting. And this is what I really want people to take away from here today, is that we are not beholden to this metronome pace of aging. Instead, what we end up getting is this kind of like, if you imagine yourself as the conductor of an orchestra, you get the baton at the front of the room and you start setting the tempo yourself. And you can give signals to the rest of the orchestra. You can tell the clarinet section, I want you to dial the volume up. I really want to hear these wind instruments over here. And then at the same time, you can be dimming down the brass instruments. They're making too much noise. Let's get the volume down. And just by changing the pace of the baton, you can actually influence the percussionists. And when the percussionists change, the entire orchestra follows along. So we get this baton in our hands when we learn these tools that can influence the pace at which the entire orchestra is playing. And that's the exciting stuff.
Yeah. And what's so exciting, the chronological keeps on going at the same amount, right? So that's how it goes backwards.
Yeah, exactly.
So what kind of things cause that to go back? What kind of things do we do?
It's all about the environment that we create inside of our bodies, the environment that we expose our genetics to. So like I said earlier, and nutrition is a huge part of that, because we can A, control it, and B, it's such a constant part of our lives. We're always putting food into our bodies multiple times per day. So nutrition is a huge part of it, but it's also the way we move and the decisions we make about healthy habits. It's creating communities of support that allow us to actually be heard and participate in something bigger than ourselves, and actually that will also hold us accountable to the path that we're on. So there's all of these steps that we can take. And the part that I focus on most as a nutritionist, because I'm biased, right? So we focus on food the most. We take out foods that we know are inflammatory and harmful and oxidative, and we replace them with foods that we know have these bioactive components to influence our genes in the way we want them to go. But in addition to that, even though I am a nutritionist and I am biased, I can't just focus on food alone, right? We know that sleep is important and movement is important and all these other pieces. And so we really need to bring this holistic kind of framework to the conversation. But we do it with the knowledge that foundationally, food is a huge part of the puzzle. If we don't put the right stuff in, we can't have the resources needed to kind of put those, I talked about methyl markers or these tags onto our genetics to actually do the work. So we need the food to bring those pieces in, but then we need the lifestyle pieces to support it as well. It's a big kind of like, I like to think of it as a spider web. You know, you've got the spider sitting in the center of her web, and out from the center, we've got all of these spokes. And then those spokes support these kind of concentric radiating circles outward. Each one of those spokes is a really foundational pillar to the strength and stability of that spider web. If we touch one, or if we wiggle one, we don't just wiggle that one, it's touching the rest of the web. And so it's like, you can't just have one piece like food and expect to fix everything. You can't just add in supplements and expect it to do all the work. We have this holistic picture, and we need to recognize all the interconnected pieces that can play together to strengthen and provide the foundation for the strength of this spider's web, or in this case, for our entire body.
I think you mentioned telomeres, and can you tell us what those are and why do we care about them?
Absolutely, yeah. So telomeres are one of the foundational spider web spokes, right? So there's all these pieces. We've talked about food, we've talked about sleep and exercise, and telomeres is one of these other spokes that have an influence on the way that we age. So for those who've never heard of telomeres before, imagine your DNA. You know, it's all packed into these chromosomes and stuffed into the nucleus of every cell. You've got 37.2 trillion cells in your body, and every single one of them contains your entire genetic code with very few exceptions. So if you imagine those chromosomes, you know, the X's and the Y's that we all have, or that you have depending on your sex, X's for women, XY for men. Each one of those X's or Y's has at the end of it, so like the very tip of each X and Y is going to have this tiny little amount of information called a telomere. And we like to think of it, quite often people will compare it to like the tip, the hard plastic tip at the end of your shoelace, right? So we all know that shoelaces have these tips on them. Does anybody know what they're for? They're there to kind of protect the rest of the shoelace, right? From fraying.
From unraveling.
Exactly. Yeah. So we have all this genetic data packed into this chromosome. It's very vulnerable. So it has this hard plastic. It's not actually plastic in our bodies, but we'll compare it to this hard plastic tip that, like a shoelace tip. And each time that our cells replicate, which is a normal part of human development, and, you know, it's how we replace cells over years. Each time that our cells replicate and reproduce themselves, it has to replicate all of that genetic data, and it has to replicate the telomere as well. Each time this happens over the course of our lives, the telomere gets just a little bit shorter. So it's like taking a pair of really sharp scissors and cutting off a fraction of that shoelace tip every time you do on your shoe, you tie up your shoes. Just a fraction. So nobody's going to notice it's missing. It's no big deal. The telomere can still go on protecting the rest of the shoelace. But as you know, the more you use those shoes, or the more that we reproduce these cells in our bodies, that telomere is going to get shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter until eventually, decades down the road, the telomere just can't function the way that it was meant to. It's meant to be providing, you know, structural support, and it's just not able to do that when it's too short. Now, the same thing happens in our bodies. Eventually, the chromosome, the telomere at the top of the chromosome can't protect the genetic data that's in it. And then we're kind of pooched, right? So we've got this genetic data floating around. It's no longer protected. It's no longer contained, and it can't function the way that it was meant to. So our cells that are in that position with telomeres that are now too short, our cells can no longer divide. Now you can start to see where the problem arises here, right? Like if your cells can't divide, they can't replace themselves. That means we can't get newer, younger cells to fix the cells that are old and that need to be replaced. The cell realizes it's in a big problem situation. It's like, uh-oh, this is not good. I've reached the end of my rope. I can't reproduce anymore. I better let the brain and the body know what's up. So it starts sending out these signals, these SOS signals. Hey, brain, I need some help down here. Hey, body, I have run out of telomere. What am I supposed to do next? Panic. And it's sending out these signals, but unfortunately, well-intentioned though it may be, those signals are doing damage to the neighboring cells. So now the neighboring cells are picking up on this chaos, and they're like, uh-oh, he's run out of telomere length. What am I supposed to do next? They start accelerating their pace of aging. So the telomeres get shorter and shorter and shorter in the neighboring cells. And so you can see how this creates kind of like a crowdfunding or a crowd escalation situation where all of a sudden now, not just one cell, but we're seeing like a migration towards aging happening very quickly throughout the body. So telomere length is part of, maintaining long, healthy, functional cells ideally for the rest of our lives, we need to figure out what it is that can allow our cells not to run out of telomere before the end of the road, basically. So we want to give ourselves the resources to extend telomeres and to slow the process of telomere erosion, is what we call it in the scientific realm. We want to slow telomere erosion and increase the length of telomeres, which is something we can do to some extent through food, through lifestyle habits. So that's an exciting part of it. As important as telomeres are, and they are important, they are not the whole story, right? It's one of the spokes on that spider web of like this holistic picture. So we want to protect our telomeres. We want to do what we can to support them, but we can't do it at the expense of everything else. We need to have this holistic picture in mind.
If we feel like our telomeres are in danger of being too short, we have to eat right, we have to sleep right, meditate, community involvement with, what's the recipe, or what can we do? Just like changing our cellular age, what can we do to slow the erosion of the telomeres? So
there's this very little known enzyme in our bodies called telomerase. And telomerase,
what are they called?
It's called telomerase. So we've got telomeres, which are the caps, and then we've got telomerase, same root word, which is the enzyme which can lengthen telomeres.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's so exciting, isn't it? Now, Our bodies have a capacity to do this independently on their own if we give them the right resources, but there is a limit to it. Like, we're not going to be able to just, add an extra foot to our telomeres. Our bodies are smart. They know that we're not intended to live forever and ever. Amen.
So I can't get back to 18, right?
Exactly. They will give us a little bit. They're not going to overdo it, but we can turn on some of this telomerase through the things that we've been talking about, supplementation, sleep, right nutrition, all of that. Lowered stress is a big one, like managing our stress properly. There are also people out in the marketplace who will gladly sell you telomerase.
What?
Or they will sell you telomerase boosting supplements. Now, you can go ahead out there and buy some if you want to. However, please listen to the rest of this conversation before you make your decision about this. The science on telomerase is still quite young. And so we don't know what the long-term implications are of putting external telomerase supportive supplements or telomerase boosting supplements into our bodies. There is the risk, it's theoretical, we don't know yet, people test this and bear it out. There is a risk that if we start pumping telomerase boosting supplements into our bodies, that we create a situation where our telomeres are, kind of immortal. Now that might sound like a good problem. Who doesn't want immortal lengthening telomeres forever and ever, right? Like, who wouldn't want to live forever? Well, a lot of us don't want to live forever.
I think there's a song about that Queen did.
Oh, yeah, probably. Maybe we'll link it to the end of this podcast.
No, we don't have the copyright.
Oh, that's true. That's true. So the thing is that if we extend our telomeres beyond what our bodies know is reasonable, beyond what is the limit of the human capacity, this becomes a problem, because this is exactly what cancer does. Cancer hijacks our cells' ability to live forever, and it grows quickly and it creates tumors. So there is this risk if we start putting telomerase boosting supplements externally into our bodies, that we trigger the potential for tumors. So I would highly recommend that you don't invest in supplements that don't have the long-term track record. Sure, short-term, they're showing that our telomeres get younger and longer. Great. But what does that mean over the course of decades? What does that mean over the course of my lifetime? I personally am not willing to take that risk yet. I would rather wait and see how the rest of the science bears out before starting to put those external things into my body. And in the meantime, I can just focus on the things that we know have worked for generations, what sunlight exposure, vitamin D, and sleep, and food, and all these things that we know can increase our telomere length to a certain amount that correlates with what's healthy in the human body.
Good advice.
Yeah, but it sounds like it's basically living a healthy lifestyle in general.
Yeah, it really is. And now a lot of people think that they are living a healthy lifestyle. I eat this for breakfast every day and I do my workout. And that's amazing. Like I want to applaud people who are taking the initiative in their own hands to do the work to quote unquote be healthy. But what science is showing us is that we can actually prove which foods do have these powers. We can prove over time, what exercises or what types of exercises are having the impact. How much sleep do we need? How much deep sleep, REM sleep do we need? All of these pieces that science is really starting to, it's kind of becoming very quick and accelerated at the moment, like how much science is coming out around the proven methods of what a body needs to be functional, to age youthfully for the long haul. Some ideas of what being healthy looks like and feels like, but we can also turn to the science. And the science is actually pointing the way for us right now. And so if we lean on stuff that we can see has been proven to work, then, we have a much better shot of reaching our final destination in style, in a body that keeps working, with a brain that keeps ticking, with joy and energy left over at the end of the day, all of these pieces that we know we all want for a long and healthy and youthful way of aging. I run a program online called the AGEless Method, which walks people through the steps that we know work. What are the scientific foundational pieces that we all need to have in place to quote unquote be healthy, to age youthfully? So if you want the shortcut version, you can come to me and I will give you the Coles notes of what are the habits you need to put in place. And so the AGEless Method is really built out on this idea of one at a time. Let's make sure that these habits are firmly foundationally placed into our lives. What do we need to do? How long is it going to take to turn this into a habit? And how do we overcome the barriers that are in our way that prevent us from sticking to what we want, right? So the program is built to tell you what the habits are, help you implement them, help you overcome the challenges, support you with the science, support you with the system, and then create this accountability container, this group magic that I like to call it. When we try to do something on our own, we might be successful. Some of us are really driven to be successful, but when we incorporate a group experience and we hold ourselves accountable to a larger whole, it's almost like you can't fail. You can fall off the wagon, but there are people there who are ready to pick you back up and hold you to this vision that you have cast for your future so that you can get there. So I really believe that the group experience is in itself a magical piece of this program.
Community does make a difference. Who you hang out with, who you listen to, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, because it kind of it informs what the norm is.
Yes.
And we all want to move towards this goal together so that our normal is aging youthfully. Our normal is not being sick. Our normal is thriving, instead of the normal that we might otherwise be exposed to in kind of the conventional system, which is normal is getting a pill when you get sick, going to the doctor and asking for a cure. That's normal in the rest of the world, but we want a different normal. And if we want a different normal, we have to create it for ourselves.
Right. Besides diet, what lifestyle hacks do you recommend for women over 50?
Well, I think probably one of the biggest ones that makes the biggest difference right away is sleep.
Yeah.
My favorite hack.
Yeah, my favorite hack too. Like, oh my gosh, I can't even remember, when we're young, we fight nap time. We don't want to go to bed. We want to wake up or like have another story, or can I get another drink of water? I'm thirsty. All these things we do when we're young to outwit our parents. I'm not tired. I don't want to go to sleep. And now it's like, oh my gosh, if someone would like invite me to have a bedtime story and like, let's go and get ready for bed. It's like this amazing gift, right? Like who doesn't want to indulge in not just the luxury of sleep, but the necessity of it? Our bodies need it. Our brains need it. So sleep is like completely transformative. If you can nail sleep, you're on a good path already. Sleep being, I would say, the most important, right next to food, right up there. Movement is another one. And I know this is really important for your listeners. I see a lot of the topics that you cover are related to strength and mobility and movement and exercise. So this is something that everybody knows. The more we do it, it's not just benefiting our bodies, it's benefiting our brains. And now, as well, it's benefiting our genes. Those are two of the big pieces. If we move, if we sleep, and then of course the food piece, making sure that we put the right ingredients into our body to make the difference.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Well, in our introduction, I want to go back to the introduction. We said that you are a licensed facelift diet coach. And I don't know, I'm interested. I think many of our listeners might be interested in this. Can you explain what a facelift diet coach is?
Yeah. The norm in our culture is that if we want a facelift, we look up a plastic surgeon, right?
Right.
We start asking around who is the best in the industry. Can I get, if it's not a facelift, can I get Botox? Can I get a tummy tuck? Can I get whatever the quick fix is for the way that we want to look? We don't like wrinkles. We don't like sagging skin. We're quite vain. And maybe that's not true of everyone who's listening, but as a whole, our society has conditioned us to want to look a particular way. And so we believe that the path to get there is through quick fixes, through procedures and products and facelifts and all of that. But actually, a lot of the food that we eat can completely transform the way our skin looks, right? So we've got collagen, we've got elastin, we've got the skin cells themselves, and they are all heavily influenced by the same things that influence our genes, right? So there are certain things we can eat. We can focus more on fruits and vegetables, on hydration, proper hydration, on holding that hydration in rather than just peeing it out. We don't want to just like have water pass through us. We want to actually absorb it like a sponge and hold on to it so it plumps us up and gives us the fluidity to move our joints properly, but also to have like enough plumpness in our face to look good. There are ways that we can shift our diet to look better as we age. Now, for some people, the looking better is, that's what they want. They want that one piece of like appearance only. For me, it's like the appearance is so interconnected with the way that the rest of my body works. It's not just about the skin. It's about the joints. It's about, the organs. It's about every cell in my body. I like to tell people, that expression, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. Well, I like to think of that as my cells. If my cells ain't happy, ain't nobody happy, because my cells make my organs and my organs make my body. And my largest organ of all is skin, right? That's our biggest organ.
That is the largest organ, right?
Yeah. So if we focus on the things that make our cells happy, the things that our cells need to thrive, well, bang, 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 all these other things start to fall out of that. Our skin looks amazing. Our joints function properly. Our brains tick along much better. Our organs, our liver, everything, our digestion, it all works better when our cells work better. So the facelift diet coach is just kind of a way to put up on a pedestal. Oh, here's a vanity piece. Here's a piece where we can look beautiful together. But oops, there's a trick at the end of the day, because not only are you going to look better, you're going to function better too, and you're going to age better as a result.
Feel better.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's kind of like a little bit of a carrot.
Yeah.
We do look better. Like our skin does look better when we do this work. But that's just kind of like, that's the beginning of this whole journey where we now get to embark on how do we want to live the rest of our lives better.
Can you tell me how you keep the moisture in your body, or how do you keep that so your skin looks better?
Yeah, so there's a few different ways. The primary way is to make sure that your electrolytes are balanced. So we want to make sure that we have the right mineral balance in our bodies. So we're looking at things like magnesium and, the electrolytes that and I don't just want people to start going out and buying Gatorade either, but
not Gatorade, no.
But there are ways to establish a mineral balance in our bodies that will allow us to hold on to moisture. Now, there are also other ways. Some of you may have heard of hyaluronic acid. Hyaluronic acid is this ingredient that we often see in face care or skincare products, moisturizers, particularly for the anti-aging products that we see out on the market shelves. But hyaluronic acid actually exists inside of our bodies too. So we have hyaluronic acid. And the thing that everybody loves about hyaluronic acid is that it's what we call a moisture magnet. So it is this kind of miracle product that grabs onto moisture in the vicinity, holds onto it. I think it's something like it can hold up to 1,000 times its own weight in water. Don't quote me on that. The number may be slightly off, but it certainly holds a lot more water than you would expect it to be able to. So when we have our mineral balance right, our electrolytes are all in order, and we have hyaluronic acid holding on to more moisture, we can hold on to more of it. We're not just like peeing all the time. And our skin looks better as a result too. But the trick, and this is really interesting about hyaluronic acid, is that if we put hyaluronic acid into our bodies in an otherwise dry environment, well, the hyaluronic acid is going to do its job regardless. So, if you put it into your body in the middle of winter and it's cold and dry out, or if you put it into your body in the middle of a hot summer and you've got the air conditioning dehumidifying the air, or if you put it into your body and you yourself are not well hydrated, then it's still going to do its job. It's going to suck moisture and hold on to it. But where is it getting that moisture from? It's getting it from you. If you're not in a hydrated environment externally, and you're not hydrating your body properly, it's going to suck moisture from your deeper reserves to do its job. But that's a problem, and it's going to end up biting you in the butt in the long term.
You'll get very dehydrated, right?
Yeah, exactly. We need to make sure that we are giving our body the hydration it needs. If we're using these topical creams, if we're adding hyaluronic acid rich food or supplementation to our diets, we can't just do it as a standalone. We really need to think of it as a big picture, long-term thing. So yeah, there are other ways to hold on to moisture. Those are two that I really like.
Okay. I understand your caution, but that is something you can supplement or find foods that have a lot of it.
You can supplement it, yes. Off the top of my head, I'm sure there are foods that have hyaluronic acid. I actually don't remember what any of them are off the top of my head at this moment.
That's all right.
But certainly you can supplement it. You can also add it topically, and this is where we see it most often. If you're so inclined, you can inject it into your skin, and it's not what I really encourage people to do, but people inject Botox and all kinds of other things. I don't encourage it, but people do it. They inject hyaluronic acid, but all of it is going to backfire if you don't have the foundational pieces in place to make sure that the short-term wins aren't at the expense of the long-term health of your body and your skin and your aging process. Because if we just keep focusing on the short-term wins, and they really do look like wins, right? They look like wins because when you put the face cream on or when you do the injection, it looks amazing. But if you do it at the expense of what does that mean for my body down the road? How am I short-circuiting what my body ultimately wants to be doing? And how am I robbing myself of the next layer of skin that's coming up? How am I robbing myself of the cell happiness down the road? I don't just want those short-term wins. I want the whole package, right? So we just want to be cautious when we bring these extra things in, that we're creating an environment where it's not going to rob Peter to pay Paul.
Right. So I deal with a number of skin issues, and I often suspect that they're food related. But do you have any advice on how do you figure out what's causing, in this case, skin conditions? Like, how do you determine what am I eating or drinking or not eating or drinking that's causing skin problems?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about the difference between what individuals need versus what the vast majority of us need. There are people who are going to have allergies. There are people who are going to have sensitivities. These are not necessarily things you're born with. These are environmental things that have your immune system has been taught to respond to as if it were a threat. So one of the things, if you're having skin issues beyond just, aging, beyond just the typical things we would see like wrinkles or sagging skin or collagen loss, if you're having issues like eczema or dermatitis or any of those rosacea, any of those skin, those topical skin issues, my best advice would actually be to do a food sensitivity test. The one that I recommend most often is called the MRT, Mediator Release Test, to look at more in-depth, not just skin, but more in-depth health issues that come from food sensitivities, that come from your immune system being triggered by something. So looking at what is triggering your immune system and then either pulling it out for a season before trying to reintroduce it gradually to see if we can repair some of that damage and retrain your body to respond to it in a different way. Or in some cases, depending on what it is, maybe eliminating it altogether forever. That's not my first choice. My first choice is to have a season of repair work where you're working on your gut health, you're working on your immune system, and then reintroducing it to see if your body can actually handle that food again in the future. Because I think it's no fun to restrict for a lifetime. We really want to have freedom when it comes to what we put into our bodies, not restriction.
Well, I always figure that if I'm having problems on my skin, there's probably problems inside that
exactly.
I can't see.
So what you see on the surface is the cells that are visible to us, but the same cells or the same cell types, are probably being affected throughout the body. So if you have like this rash on your skin, well, who's to say that rash is not also in your digestive system? It's not also in, your cardiovascular system. Your cells are reacting to something, and we see it on our face. And that's a great way for our body to say like, hey, listen up.
Something's wrong.
Exactly. So don't ignore me because there's something happening deeper beneath here. And we want to take those skin symptoms seriously and look into it, see if there's something we can do to fix it, for sure.
Well, yeah. And not to dwell on this too long, but if you go to your local dermatologist, they're very big on handing you very expensive ointments.
Yeah.
that are topical treatments, and they'll say this will never go away, but this will make it feel better, or
finding the root cause
better.
is always a better option if you can
exactly. And you'd be surprised how often skin issues are directly connected to digestive issues. So if our digestion is struggling with something, whether it's a food sensitivity or an inability to digest a particular food, it shows up on our skin. And of course, a topical skin isn't going to solve the problem if we keep eating the thing that's causing the problem to start with. It's like you're fighting with one hand, you don't know what the other hand is doing. So I agree. Dermatologists are great, but they are trained to prescribe a pill for every ill, right?
Yes.
They're not trained in root cause resolution. So we want to get to the root cause. We want to look at the digestive system. We want to see if there's food sensitivities. And then from there, allow the body to cultivate this health that eventually shows up as glowing, beautiful, youthful skin.
Okay, that's good advice. And part of the problem with dealing with trying to remove food is your skin doesn't clear up quickly. So I can see where taking the test and having some suspects would make it easier than just saying, I'm going to randomly remove things.
Yeah, exactly.
For a whole season. When you say a season, you mean like autumn or summer or?
No, not necessarily. It could be, a number of weeks. I think I want to say, you need kind of like 4 to 8 weeks minimum of going without a food to allow for full healing. And you don't just want to avoid the food during that time. You also want to be strengthening your digestive system or strengthening your immune system during that same period of time. Some people will, never be able to go back to that food. But a lot of people, when they do the healing work connected to the gut health, will be able to, at least in part, introduce that food back in again without the same symptoms. It's amazing what our body is capable of doing when we give it the right resources. Our bodies want to work with us. And yet, as we age, we have this belief that our bodies are not cooperating, that they're not doing what we want them to do anymore.
Yeah.
But we have the power to give them the tools to do what we want to do. So we have to cooperate with our bodies in order for our bodies to cooperate with us.
And that leads into my next question, and that's about the AGEless method. It focuses on diet and lifestyle. So how does this work, and how do people work with you? Is this a one-on-one to go over test results and then figure out diet and lifestyle habits, or how does it work?
It's not one-on-one. It's actually a group program. So remember, I was talking about the magic of groups, that we hold ourselves up and we go further as a group together. It's a group program. It runs once a year at the moment. I may increase that in the future, but for now it's once a year. Everybody comes in at the same time. We work through new habits together, holding each other accountable through the process. It's all online, which is fabulous because I live in a very remote part of British Columbia, Canada. And, thank God for the internet. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to connect with the rest of the world. But it's all online. So you can watch the lesson component. So we talk about what are the foods that we need to increase? What are the foods that we need to remove? What are the ways that we want to prepare our foods to encourage or to allow some of these bioactive components that we've been talking about to actually make it into our bodies and to actually be useful when they get there. So we talk about all of these things. We build habits up over time. And one of the challenges, I think, when we try to make these big transformational changes in our lives, we're so excited. We just want to do it all at once. And so we're like, yes, everything all together right now. And that's exciting, but it's not always sustainable. So the approach that I take instead is just, little baby steps. Like, what can we focus on this week? And what are we going to do? What is my goal for this week? Every day I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to drink 2 cups of water before I, move into my coffee, my breakfast, or whatever it is. Tiny little steps. And over the weeks, we stack these habits and we have the support around us to help us overcome when they're not easily accomplished. And if there's a barricade or a barrier in our life, we have people to talk with. We have a community to brainstorm with. We build these habits up slowly over time until they don't even feel like work. They just feel like normal, the new normal that we are creating for ourselves in our group. And so it's really built on habit stacking over time. And by the end, you get to this point at the end, we retest. We test your epigenetics, your pace of aging at the beginning. And then we also test it again at the end. And we can see that the things that we've been doing have had this much effect, or maybe not as much effect as we want. And so we're like, okay, well, what's the habits that aren't working as well? How can I make sure that they work? It gives us an opportunity to actually assess, reassess, and move forward. So it becomes this gradual, almost, it's not like it's a trick, but by the time you get to the end, you're like, but I didn't do anything. I didn't do any work because all of it ended up being so natural.
Well, that's what's so cool about testing at the end. You can really see
exactly
the results of I didn't do anything, but really what happened, right?
Exactly. We've shifted the environment. We've done it slowly. We've done it methodically. And now this is normal. And normal is more youthful aging process.
That's cool.
If people want to contact you or follow you online, where would they go? How can they find you?
Yeah, so I have a website. It's www.joannabowen.com. And people can find me there. I'm also on Facebook. I think you mentioned it at the beginning. I host a group called the Younger with Food Tribe, and they can find that on Facebook. So just go to Facebook and type in Younger with Food, and you should be able to find the group there. It is for women over 40. So that's kind of the audience that is coming into that area. I am on Instagram. I don't use it as much, but I am there, Joanna Bowen Wellness as well. And then as a special gift to your audience today, I've actually created a document that you can use to start you on the path, to get you taking those first steps. It's called 3 Genius Hacks to Help Unleash Inner Youth Without Botox, Fillers, or Cosmetic Surgery. I'm gifting it to you for free. All you have to do is go to joannabowen.com/genius. Genius, Genius. It's not because I'm a genius. It's because we're dealing with our genes. So joannabowen.com/genius, and you can get those 3 genius hacks to help unleash inner youth.
Excellent. Thank you.
That's great. That's great. Well, we'll put links to all of that in our show notes. And thank you, Joanna, so much for being our guest today. It's just been delightful.
Yeah, I'm so excited that I was able to be here. And I really hope that the takeaway that your audience leaves today with is that we have the opportunity to feel good in our bodies, to feel good in our skin, to have a lifetime free of pain in a body that works and that enables our freedom and our joy every single day. And with a mind that stays sharp, that allows us to keep learning and growing and experience this beautiful life that we're all given. And I hope that what people understand is that it's not only possible, but it's almost inevitable when we start putting these right habits in place through the foods that we eat and the lifestyle choices that we make. So I really thank you for helping me to share that message with more people. And I look forward to hopefully seeing some of you inside the AGEless Method at some point.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's great. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, I'm now thinking about my cellular age. Why do I think it might not be as good as I'd like? I have to say it's sort of motivating to think about my food choices and movement when I start thinking about how my cells are aging.
Yes. There certainly was a lot to think about from her talk. And I really liked what she had to say about epigenetics. And although you can't really change your genetics, you can certainly affect the epigenetics around your DNA.
Yeah. All of that food, environment.
Yeah.
Exercise, all the things that you do.
Sleep.
Yeah.
I love the sleep part. And the telomeres. Oh my gosh.
That was interesting because I've heard people, like on other podcasts, I've heard people talking about telomeres.
Yeah. The little shoelace things. I've heard of that. And I really don't have a grasp on it, but I want to make sure that, I don't let mine unravel. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Because I sort of got the feeling that once they get too short, that was sort of that's the end game.
Yeah. I want to learn more about that.
Anyway, that was interesting. I want to remind our listeners that Joanna has a gift for us. It was 3 genius hacks to unlock inner youth without fillers, Botox, or cosmetic surgery.
Yes, I love that. And you can get that gift by going to Joanna's website, which is joannabowen.com/genius. So we'll have a link in the show notes too. So you can just click through if you prefer.
Yes. I would love to hear what our listeners have to say about today's episode.
And let us know if you've tried anything with the epigenetic testing and what you found out, the before and after kind of thing. Just let us know how you're doing on keeping fit and strong and give us some hints and tips because Jill and I are very interested in that.
We could use tips and hints.
For sure.
You can find us at becomingellie.com or on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Mastodon.
And be sure to join our private Facebook group where we encourage and support each other.
It was great talking with you today, Chris. I'm looking forward to our next episode of the Fit Strong Women Over 50 podcast.
Me too. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.